All right. So, like I was saying, so today's training is going to be focused on the client facing, sharing the story message. So, what is it that we share with people? How do we present some of the PowerPoint slides and walk them through that presentation? And so, what we've talked about the last few weeks is how to make a contact, how to get people intrigued, and just getting the verbiage out there to sit down with us. From there, our goal is really simple. Our goal is to not try and convince someone to become a client of ours, nor a teammate. Our goal is to share the story of who we are and what we do and let them kind of filter themselves in or out. It took me a really long time for me to have that mindset, but I think walking through the presentation we walk through now really helped me see that perspective. And then two, I think a lot of teammates and people that we sit down with have gained a lot of trust and credibility. I'm thinking recently of a meeting I had with Ryan Schwans where it was one of his best friends. The guy was, kept begging us to just make the sales pitch, just tell us what you're wanting to sell me. And we just kept going slide by slide and just saying, hey, we're just looking to share info. Maybe it's a fit, maybe it isn't. And at the end, he made a comment saying, I kept waiting for that sales pitch and it never happened. And now I know that what you guys are doing is truly like a good cause, not just trying to get me in for a sales pitch. So I like what you're doing. Like this makes sense. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys here. But what is that presentation? What is it that we're walking through with people and making sure that they understand who we are and what we do. So I'm only going to walk through a handful of these first slides. What I'll do is probably break it up into some of the introductory slides, and then I'll spend a little bit of time on the client core financial concepts for next week, and then the week after we'll walk through some of the recruiting slides. But we'll kind of see how we get through some of this stuff here. So sharing my screen here. So when we're getting into this, the goal is that we're only going to be talking with these people for about 15 to 20 minutes. So it doesn't have to be that long. It can be really short and to the point. I think the message that we're trying to convey is that we care about people, we care about the mission that we're working behind, and that we're wanting to genuinely get the word out there. And so just making some nice introductions, walking through who we are, what we do, why we call ourselves the Money Milestones Company, walking through what our mission is. I think just this one slide alone separates us from the entire industry. I would make the assumption and make the claim that about 90% of our industry is not focused on what our mission is. Our mission is to erase financial illiteracy and then protect and build wealth for families. Most of the industry is focused on catering to the wealthy and building recurring income solely for the advisor, just making them wealthy by talking to wealthy people. It's not about solving the problem, it's about getting access to the bigger pieces of the pie. And so I think from that alone, that solves that sets us apart. Now at the end of the day, I tell people this too, we are for profit. So we're not a nonprofit. We're not looking to just hand out brochures and hopefully you learn this on your own. But what we're looking to do is make sure that we can start and talk with you and not talk at you. So what we're looking to do is make sure you have confidence in what your money situation is and what the road ahead looks like. And that can come in a number of different forms. So when we dive into all of this, understanding, having people that we talk to understand what financial literacy is and isn't is really valuable. I walk through explaining some of the intangibles that we might not necessarily see with our eyes of what financial literacy is, but why it's so important. So I haven't personally had anybody sit down with me that was on the verge of divorce, and we come to find out that it's just about money. However, that's one of the leading causes of divorce is a financial situation. So explaining to people, hey, that might be, just because you guys don't fully understand or you're not on the same page about your finances, that could be the determination of staying married or not. So what if we could help increase or strengthen your marriage? The question I always ask folks is, how many nights have you gone without sleep or horrible sleep because you were stressing about how to make ends meet or how to get ahead financially? Well, what if we could just forever take that away from you? You never have to worry about money again. maybe you're not immediately a millionaire, but all of a sudden you understand the concepts to get you ahead, and you're not going to be stuck in the rat race. Then there's also tangibles to it. So when we're sitting down with someone, for someone that's new, when we walk through a client fact finder and we're asking them some questions about money in the bank or debt or saving for their future, it's really easy to pick up on someone that might have an issue with their finances. So when we're talking with somebody and we ask about, in the top left corner, how much money do you have in an emergency fund? How much money do you have sitting in the bank? I can tell you there has been too many occurrences that I ask someone that question. They say, well, I'll let you know when I get paid on Friday. Like, that's a clear red flag that we need to immediately halt. We need to take a deeper dive. And this is no longer about, becoming extremely wealthy. It's okay, what's causing this now? We need to get to the root cause of what is creating this issue. Furthermore, when we do talk with people and when we ask about debt that they might have and they say, well, let me list out my credit cards. Okay, that's a really bad sign. I've had people that we've had to walk through a dozen plus different credit card balances and interest rates and minimum payments. So the average person in America has about $9,000 of credit card debt. And I'm willing to bet that that number is continuing to increase with the economy we have and with where inflation's going. Things are naturally getting more expensive. The ability to pay things on time or get ahead is just slipping away. And then obviously, student loans is a laughing stock. I've yet to have a single person, hear that stat and, not laugh about it. Half people aren't paying on them, half of them are taking out random student loans. Who knows? It's a crapshoot there. But then the thing that I think people begin to kind of lean in on. So when we talk about, the subtleties of our business, when we talk about the bottom right corner, 1 in 3 Americans have nothing saved for retirement. That one always makes people that I sit down with kind of quiet. They lean in a little bit. Some of them, they're like, well, I have 200 grand in my 401k. Like, how does someone not save for retirement? Or they say, okay, I'm not alone. Like, for, every 3 people, there's a couple of us, for every handful of folks. So I'm not alone. Well, I want to hear more. So all of that I cover very briefly and succinctly, but I get them knowing, hey, when we're sitting down with folks, it's not, hey, do you have $500,000? No, okay, move on. Or, okay, now we can talk. It's we want to get to the root cause of where you're at currently and figure out where you're going moving forward. And then we kind of talk about, how we're in the education business. So, at the end of the day, us handing a book to somebody does not solve their financial problems, nor does it pay us at all. However, what this does is open up the conversation for what might come. So one of the clients that I picked up, I remember in 2020 when we were first starting to use these books, she said, I'm really grateful that I got this book, but I'm even more thankful and blessed that it comes with someone. I read the book. It let me know that I need to ask questions, but I still have no clue where to go moving forward. And so, for those watching or listening into the recording, or for those that are new, this is not the end result. This book that we hand out to folks is simply just the beginning for us to get in front of them, for us to begin to peel back layers and figure out what their situation looks like. So focusing on education, I tell folks this book helps you understand, if you've never talked to somebody before, the questions or topics that you should be thinking about and prioritizing in your financial plan. Then we kind of, hit a pivotal point here and say, hey, the rest of our conversation here now is going to be centered around 2 topics. We do 2 things here within WealthWave, and the first is client facing, obviously. Our goal is to help everybody that we possibly can in their personal financial journey that's looking for a help. And we want to make sure that literacy financially is increasing everywhere and that people are feeling more confident than ever about their money. But parlaying that to, step number 2, we can only talk to so many people. I myself, Alec, cannot have 20,000 clients. I can only work with so many people. In the state of alone, there's nearly 12 million folks. I don't have time to talk to everybody. And so we simply need to expand as we go about our day. And so number 2 of what we do on a day-to-day basis is what we call our E to E movement. We're actively looking to expand. We're looking for people that are dissatisfied, looking for a career change, or looking for some type of a way to earn additional income and make an impact. We're going to talk about both of those in depth here. From there, focusing on the client side, I tell folks, hey, what we're going to teach you here today, I want you to walk away with hopefully learning a couple new concepts and strategies on how to look at your money and how to think about it. And maybe some of this is review, but some of this might be completely new. I think by making that statement, it gets them a little more intrigued to say, hey, you know what? I might be hearing something I've never learned before. I have no clue what's coming next. I think I know, I don't know if you guys have experienced this. I know I have, and I'm helping, a newer teammate make some calls, and he's getting a lot of people saying, well, I already know everything about money. Great. I then click the next slide and I say, well, have you ever heard of the rule of 72? Probably about 1 in 3 people have ever heard of this before. And that's like a generous statement. And so I love the people that tell us when we sit down, hey, I already know everything about money. And then we sit down and walk through this very first slide and they say no. And I say, well, sounds like you're learning something new already. Makes them be a little more focused and makes them humble just a little bit. Walking through the rule of 72. It's how compound interest works. You can walk through this slide here, but I'm helping someone understand this concept. So what I tell folks is this is helping you understand money from a logical perspective as opposed to maybe an emotional perspective. So take the number 72 and divide it by your interest rate, and that's how long it takes your money to double. Why I say it's a logical perspective is we can be very emotional with our money. We see the market go down 0.5%. We think that the world's coming to an end, but we got to put out all of everything that we're doing into perspective here. So if we take the number 72 and divide it by whatever interest rate it is, it's going to tell us how long it takes our money to double. So this concept can work for us, but it can work against us as well. 72 divided by 1 equals 72. There's no emotions to that. It's just simply a math equation. But if we understand where it's being applied and how it affects us, that's where we can make a logical decision. So when someone comes to me and says, hey, I'm really freaked out about a mortgage, it's at 2%. Well, a new mortgage these days is around 7, if not maybe more, could be a little bit less, but we can understand, hey, we have an incredibly low interest rate, that is debt. However, we're getting ahead, we're making extra payments. We can understand from a logical perspective that although that's debt, that's very low. And then those same people then will have $10,000 on a credit card at 29% and not think twice about it. So understanding the percentage allows for someone to say, hey, you know what? That's really unhealthy on the negative side, but also let's think about the positive side. In building assets, people have money sitting in a bank CD at 0.000%, and they think that it's safe. Meanwhile, inflation's up. You pick the number because no one knows what it truly is. But we're missing out on the market. I told someone recently that I sat down with, in the past 12 months, the market's up nearly 30%. And she thought she was just doing fine because she earned like 2% in a bank CD. You missed out on a lot of interest that you could have gotten, but you didn't understand the rule of 72 and you weren't putting it in practice. So putting that into numbers and showing how that works, we can show this is a character from the book. Her name's Zoe. She inherits $10,000 at the age of 19. What can we do to be smart about it? And so walking through these different rates of return can show us, how money works, how money grows and compounds over time. And from here, why is this so impactful? Well, if we put it, you just keep it in a savings account over a 48-year timeline, it's not even going to double once, barely even grows by 50%. And as we incrementally grow, it's only going to make a very minute shift up. And so what we need to do is make our money actually go to work for us and actually begin to compound and double over time. And you can see at the 9% and 12% rate of returns, the more we're getting this money doubling and working for us harder, the more this is going to be worthwhile. And so I stop and ask the person, I say, what would it be like to have $2.5 million at retirement and you had to put little effort into it because you let that work super hard and compound for you? And then they start to think about that. And they're like, well, I'm not currently doing that. Or, am I on track to have $2 million at that point? Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it's no. More often than not, they have no clue. So I say, hey, that's a concept that's really worthwhile learning. And I'm glad that we walked through it. I and kind of inject my personal story. I have a degree in financial services. I knew I wanted to join this industry. I had one college class with one professor cover this concept on one PowerPoint slide. All 4 years of school, have a whole lot of education on very unimportant topics, very unrelated topics. But I had one financial professor cover that concept on one slide. And so I tell folks, hey, congratulations, you just learned about that more than I did in all 4 years of college. So make a little joke about it and we move on. So the next concept that we walk through with folks is where taxes come into play. This slide is kind of split down the middle in two different ways to explain it. And it helps people maybe get a shift of perspective or understanding where taxes come into play. So I say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, this is how taxes work when it comes to our investments. So let's just focus on the 30,000-foot view on the left-hand side of the screen. Think of a farmer, the seed versus the harvest. The seed that's being planted is going to be far less and far smaller than the harvest that is reaped from it. And so if we make an investment of $10,000 and many years later, when we take the harvest from that, it turns into $250,000. You live in America, so that means you're going to pay taxes somewhere, some way, somehow. And so what number would you want to pay taxes on? Every time they say, well, I don't want to pay taxes at all. Great. That's not an option. So depending on what number you want to pay taxes on, tells me, the advisor, and me, the financial professional, how I should serve you. So what type of recommendations I should make, what type of accounts we should be considering in investment styles. That now leads us to the right-hand side of the screen. So there's three types of buckets that your money can be put into when it comes to tax planning: tax now, tax later, and tax never. Walk through those examples and explaining how those work will tell us how we should build an account, what type of accounts we should open up. And many times people have no clue how this stuff operates. They had no clue that their words are, hey, I've never had a client in all 8 years of sitting down with folks tell me, I wish I gave more of my money to the government. I wish I paid more in taxes. No one's ever told me that. But probably 95% of the people that I talk to don't have anything in a tax exempt strategy, a tax never, like a Roth IRA. Most people that I sit down with are starting at zero. They have all of their money in a 401k. They have all of their money in IRAs. They're not doing anything to prevent future tax savings. And they're just simply throwing money where they can because some random TV commercial told them to do that 10 years ago. And so no one really typically has a clue as to what they're doing. So moving on to next slide. So this slide here is then beginning to talk about retirement planning. So depending on the people we're talking to, I let them know, hey, maybe this is more relevant for your parents. I make that comment because my goal is to put a subtle seed and include to them that it might make sense for them to refer someone to me that is their parents, a coworker that's their parents' age, a neighbor, whoever that might be. I say, hey, you know what? You're in your mid 30s. This might be more relevant for someone that's in their 50s or 60s. So do you maybe have a coworker or a family member that this might be more relevant to? Walk through the slide here. This is helping someone understand what it takes to actually be able to retire. What this is saying at the top of the screen, it says that you're going to need, as an estimate, roughly 70% of your pre-retirement income to be able to retire. And so I say, for example, if you were making 100,000 a year, we should be able to identify about $70,000 a year on average of income coming in passively. So where can this money come from? Which seems like a big number, 70,000 a year. It can be. Everyone's situation is different, but in percentage format, where is this money coming from? So in the case of someone that is really close to retirement, they're going to have maybe about 40% of their income coming from Social Security. And I have many clients that are, currently retiring, soon to retire, already retired, that I can vouch that 40, if not maybe even more, depending on their situation, percent of their retirement income is coming from Social Security. So we can get that covered. However, hey, client, you're 35. Hey, it's not going to necessarily be that, but I want them to understand that it probably isn't going to be there to the degree that it is now when we go to retire. So the next place is then your 401k. You have some people say, well, I don't have a 401k at all. I have nothing saved with my employer. Well, now what do I do? That adds as much significance to then the whole other half, the whole other wing, which is personal savings. So that kind of leads us to begin to think, okay, what should I be doing on a monthly basis or annual basis to be able to save personally for my retirement future, for my financial future? Most people aren't doing anything, or they just simply, I've had this told to me many times, I just kind of hope I would figure it out once I get closer. That's not an answer. That's not a viable answer. So, Mr. and Mrs. Client, what are you actively doing right now to make sure that you're on track for your financial future? They say, well, I don't know. Great. Let's walk through what that looks like. So the last concept that we walk through with folks is what's called the time value of money. This is a really easy and tangible concept to understand what we need to do on a monthly basis to get to $1 million by the age of 67. This is assuming a 9% rate of return on average. And I tell folks that that's very doable. That number is kind of thrown into the mix, but we can give that in confidence over like the last 60 years. The S&P 500 has averaged over 10% a year. So we're pretty confident that we can get that, but it's just giving us nice, crisp numbers for us to walk through where all of this is at. And so I just give my story in this slide here. Actually, I got started in business at 22. And so I had reached out to all of my buddies that were in college getting ready to graduate and said, hey, give me $100 a month and I'll make you a millionaire. No problem. Well, 20, 22-year-olds, they don't necessarily have $100 a month. So we're living on student loans. We're not prioritizing our future. We think we're going to live for forever. So I tell people, hey, people told me no because they said, well, I'm about to make 30 grand a year once I graduate college. I'm going to be wealthy. Well, everyone laughs at that because that's obviously not a lot of money. But as time progresses, we think that we're going to get farther ahead than we actually are. And so 25 rolls around and maybe this still isn't a priority to us. It's still not a lot of money. But as time progresses, we get married, we have some kids, and then all of a sudden we take a look and we're in our mid 30s and student loans still aren't paid off yet. We've got a mortgage, we've got two mouths that we're trying to feed, we've got a couple car loans, and all of a sudden we're midway through our 30s. We're approaching 40, where we're about halfway through our working career, and we're behind. We're just trying to pay off debt, and we only have 20 years until we want to retire. And so the majority of the people that I sit down with are in their mid 30s and up because all of this stuff becomes a lot more relevant. So unfortunately, early on, it takes a lot less on a monthly basis to get to the same finish line, but most people don't prioritize it. And so because of that, it's costing them a lot of money. That's where clients then say, well, you should talk to my kids. Happy to do that. But as you can see, these numbers and how they operate, the longer we wait, significant money is needed to be able to just get to that same finish line. This is where we can make a clue, hey, a 60-year-old probably isn't going to give me $8,600 a month. And so then we say, well, hey, maybe it's a fit that they become a business partner of ours. Maybe you need to focus on an encore career as opposed to pure retirement, or maybe we need to adjust what our goals are. But what I tell folks is this is a prime way for someone that sits down with me to have a full grasp and understanding of what their expectations should be for when we get to the finish line. So if a 45-year-old sits down with me and they've never saved anything before, if they don't have that to work with on a monthly basis, we're not going to get to a million. And we can say, hey, you know what? I need to work till I'm 70, or I need to have a part-time job, or I need to pay off some debt, whatever that is. We manage our expectations, but we don't get to the finish line and act shocked. Talked with a lady this morning that she's 43. She's got about 900 grand right now. Some of that's with me, some of it isn't. Some of it's still with her employer. But she's like, well, I want to retire when I'm 55. Well, what would it actually take to get there? And let's work backwards. We might not have enough. You might need to work until you're 57 or 58. Maybe you don't, but we need to understand now what that expectation could and should be. That way you're not shocked at that given point in time. So all of that being said, those are some of the concepts that we sit down with. And this is what our what we call our 7 money milestone process is. So first and foremost, no matter who you are, every single person we sit down with is going to walk through the exact same process. They're going to walk through and learn the exact same concepts, every person we sit down with. And so I want you to know that we are easily referable, because if you refer us your multi-billion-dollar friend, or you refer us your child that's just getting into the workforce, they're going to learn the same concepts. We're going to walk through the same 7 money milestone process, but their plans might look different, but they're going to get treated the same and they're going to get the same education. That is a huge win for anybody that talks to us and sits down with us, to hear that we don't care if you've got a lot of money or not a lot of money. We want to make sure that you are understanding what financial literacy is, and you're going to still get walked through the same client process when we walk through stuff. And then I just explain all 7 points. So number one is financial education. Hey, that's what we walked through today. What did you learn new? Let them talk. Let them say, hey, I never knew about the rule of 72, or hey, I just had no concept of where taxes fell into play. I didn't realize I probably need to be more concerned about it in the future, or whatever the case is. And then I say steps 2 through 7 is where we actually roll up our sleeves and put a plan together that's going to get you from where you're at currently to where you want to be. So number two, proper protection. Life insurance. What life insurance do you have in play? And I say, well, just like going back to that example, maybe your child doesn't need life insurance right now, or maybe they do, but we're going to talk about it. I want to make sure that they understand where it is and how it fits in. Emergency fund. What do we need? How are we going to get there? Same with debt management. If you've got 12 credit cards, it's not going to be fun for anybody. However, we still need to put a plan together to walk through that with you, and make sure that we get that debt taken care of. Cash flow. As we continue to work together, we're going to figure out what your budget is. We're going to be able to navigate as you take pay increases or pay decreases, or move from job to job, or as debt gets paid off and we have more money to work with, what are we doing with it? And then all of that is then building to leading up to number 6, building wealth. And we got to accomplish a whole lot of stuff before we can figure that out. We got to really worry about a whole lot of other things before we talk about getting rich and wealthy. We got to make sure that our current status is not going to lead us down a bad path. So we got to make sure our present is solid before we can look into the future. And then we talk about how we can get you to get to financial freedom or a work optional lifestyle. And then finally, encapsulating all of that, number 7 is proper protection. How do we make crystal clear clarity that all of the funds that are, the wealth that you've built is going to where it needs to go? We want to make sure that you are not leaving behind a financial disaster or leaving behind a legacy. So all of that being said, Mr. and Mrs. Client, that's where I kind of end this off. I ask, what questions they might have. And I say, how many people do you think need to walk through this? Typically, they say a lot of people need to do that. And then we ask, do you feel like you could benefit from walking through a money milestone process? And at that point, they're going to say yes or no. If they say yes, then that means that we need to now set up a time at the end of this call and walk through our client process with them. And that is a great stopping point for us today. I want to stop here and stop sharing my screen. So that's a great place for us to find out, does someone want to talk to us about their finances or not? And it's mixed reviews. Some people say, hey, you know what? They open up, hey, I've got a 401k I need to roll over, or hey, you know what? A lot of this is taken care of, but I need to get some life insurance in place, or hey, I'm taken care of, but I've got some coworkers, or I have someone in mind. That helps us have full clarity. If we just say, hey, do you want to buy life insurance? That's being a salesperson. That's not what we're wanting to do. So by walking through that comprehensive presentation, I obviously slowed it way down for us today, for us to walk through it and take some time, but we can walk through that first portion relatively quickly. So I want to stop there. Does anybody have any questions, thoughts, comments about what I've walked through here?
The only thing I would add, Alec, is the obviously the nature of how we set up our one-on-one presentations will vary slightly. We might have gathered a hot button on somebody or a loose idea of, what is intriguing them to begin with. A question I like to kind of end with when you're on that money milestone slide is I'm just going to assume that there is some sort of interest if I don't have a clear hot button. And so I'll just ask, like, of these money milestones, which ones are of most important to you, Mr. and Mrs. Client? Let them obviously tell you where you can serve them. I mean, that's obviously a huge step into closing is when they're telling you the what's the adage from my lead is if you say it, people tend to defend it, but if they say it, it's true. And so
Yeah,
when you get other people to tell you things, that's the direction that you must go, rather than just assuming or avoiding red flags or walking on eggshells. Like, get them to tell you where they're at with all this information.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else?
I think that's a valid point, Ryan, that asking asking those questions and receiving those answers from your clients is going to tell you a lot of what you're kind of it's going to tell you what you're looking for. It's going to tell you what you need to help them. I say that because I have a gentleman and his now fiance. They haven't been clients for too long, but they're Max and Ross, and they're just getting their family going, right? And they've came to me and they said, "Hey, we're gonna get married in a year. We gotta pay for a lot of it ourselves. We don't really want to go in debt. Want to lower our payments, they call them, to their Roth IRAs. Obviously, not a payment, but a contribution, just in terms of talking to them. But when I sit down with them this week, it's going to be basically, okay, what do how much do you need, right? What's your goal? What do you got to pay for? Right, because obviously the opportunity cost that comes with just taking out, 250, $300 a month off of a Roth contribution, especially in the market right now. But you also face the side of, I don't want to let things continuously ride for the next 12 months within those accounts, just their contributions, and say, oh, we can pull them out in a year because I don't know what a year is going to bring, right? Maybe that would be a detrimental withdrawal, potentially. So that's going to be that conversation, and curious to hear if you agree or disagree.
Yeah.
Do you, do you think that that's a positive way to handle that?
Yeah. No, I think that's totally fine. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't really have any other notes to add to that. Sorry.
No, I
You were
think it's
kind
just in
of,
terms of younger people saying, "Hey, I want to take money out of this because all I'm going to do is put it in a savings account." Well, I get that, right? I understand that. Um, but just on how to, I guess the overall context of that conversation is, what do you make them realize? Okay, what do you really need to save?
Mhm.
Do you know what these bills are going to be? Let's take a look at both of your incomes. There's a decent amount of savings there already. Do I think that they'll be fine footing the bill for what they got to foot the bill for without taking out of their Roths? Yes. But initially, this is what a lot of younger folks look at and go, well, man, this would just help a lot if I had it right in front of
Yeah.
me. So
Yeah. Yeah. For the younger people or for anybody, I let them know that this needs to be money that's put into a Roth that you are totally fine, not touching. until 59.5. So if you even in the slightest don't feel like, or you're not sure if you're going to need to touch it or not, it's better to not put that money in now. And 6 months from now, then put 5 grand in. Like that's not going to be the difference between you retiring and not retiring. So like that's not the end of the world, but it's better to be on the cautious side than then someone builds the habit of just continuously hitting the withdraw button from their Roth. That's not healthy.
Well, and I think the other thing you're highlighting, Joe, is natural wiring of human beings. I was on a call with a referral yesterday, and there's probably not going to be a lot I can tangibly do for her at this time, but she just was displeased with her situation in life, and just going on and on. And I finally said to her, I'm like, a lot of this isn't your fault. It's sort of how we as Christians know we come in just naturally wired as sinful human beings, and we have to learn how to bring about joy in our lives and gratefulness and all that. That's all learned once we understand that concept. And money, I think, is the same way. We are naturally wired, unless you're gifted into some family with a lot of money. But most of us, most of our prospects are naturally wired to attach fear and scarcity to their money, right? And so there's a rewiring that has to occur within that mindset, whether it's an individual or a couple. And I think that is a lot of what we have to do, is peel back that curtain, understand, are you needing to reduce your contributions because you can't pay your bills? Or is this just an instinct that is going to make you feel better about, whatever it is they need to pay for? Right. So it's a fear and scarcity that is probably driving that decision. And it's our job to peel back that curtain and say, why? Why do you really need to pull back this much? And is that going to be, the true answer to your situation? Or can we find another way? Are you open to me showing you another way to maybe reducing it by $100 or whatever it is, right? Because it's our job to help people save, because saving is not a natural instinct for a lot of people. So I think that's just a huge thing that we need to be cognizant of when we're talking about the human instincts that are at hand here. Is we're just not natural people. We're just not natural savers.
Cool. Any other thoughts or comments about presentation, or is there any like slides that you might present differently that might kind of help us all, you know, add into how we present ourselves? Cool. Well, yeah, I hope this was helpful. We ended up getting through the whole first half of the presentation. So, when we get together next week, we'll talk about the second half of the presentation and then roll out from there. So, yeah, between now and then, hopefully we can make some progress in our businesses, and we'll get back together next week and talk a little bit more about the recruiting aspect of our presentation.